Let's walk and talk about gay marriage. Now, if you're watching this video, chances are pretty high that you're familiar with the fact that the Supreme Court earlier this week declined to get involved with a number of cases that had been working their way up in which a state had outlawed or forbid same-sex marriage, and then a federal judge had stayed that. They could have gotten involved and possibly made same-sex marriage legal in all states. They possibly could have struck it down nationwide, but they didn't do anything, and so now in those additional 11 states, same-sex marriage is now the law of the land, which is obviously good news. And we get to talk about great numbers like the fact that it's now legal in 30 different states, or that 60% of all Americans now live in a state where it's legal. Now, this is obviously good news. It is cause for celebration. But one additional reason that I want to celebrate today is that I recently was exposed to a chart that compares acceptance rates for same-sex marriage historically to interracial marriage. Now, if you're on the younger side, it's probably hard for you to even imagine that interracial marriage was a contentious issue at one point, but it was in fact illegal in almost all states up until not that many decades ago. Now, if you're seeing the chart here right now, it's amazing how much faster the American public has grown to accept, and in some cases even embrace, same-sex marriage in comparison to interracial marriage. Now, that's obviously good news. In the case of interracial marriage, as you're seeing there, it took up to 30 years after it was legal around the country for it to be accepted by the majority of all the people in the country, whereas in the case of same-sex marriage, we've had majority support for it since 2012, and it's still not even legal around the country. Now, of course, ideally, it would be legal around the country, but we're still at least a few years off from that. But anyway, just wanted to show you that chart because I think this shows that people are becoming more tolerant around the country, and it's a good contrast between those two different assaults on traditional marriage. But back to same-sex marriage. Now, the Supreme Court decided not to get involved, and some Republicans, but not many, have been fairly outspoken in their criticism of the Supreme Court's decision. Ted Cruz is probably the biggest example of that. But the question is, are the Republicans backpedaling? Are they going to get away from this being an issue that they think they can win on? And I think that there are two principal reasons why that's probably the case. When you have a social issue that the Republicans try to use to win elections on, there's two reasons they do it. Either they think they can raise a lot of money off of it, or they think that they can galvanize a lot of votes. And I think that same-sex marriage now is not going to do either of those two things for them. Now, because corporations don't have much of a vested interest in this, aside from perhaps Hobby Lobby, it's mainly, will people donate money because they see the GOP fighting against same-sex marriage? I don't think that that's probably the case anymore. I mean, it's never been the big fundraiser that something like abortion has been. And there's so much overlap with those other social issues without the possible consequence of turning off moderate voters who are no longer all that against same-sex marriage. I mean, if you can whip people on your side up into a frenzy by talking about abortion, or the war on drugs, or gun rights, or something like that, why run the risk of turning people off by talking about same-sex marriage? I could, of course, be wrong. I guess we have to wait a couple of electoral cycles to find out, especially for the presidential election of 2016. That's really going to be the big test case for if they decide not to attack on this anymore. So thank you, as always, for walking and talking with me. I will leave you with this prompt for discussion, because I want you guys to predict, when will we have legal same-sex marriage around the entire country? In what year? And do you think in 2016 same-sex marriage is going to be an issue that the GOP thinks they can win on? Let me know down in the comments.